Station, this is Houston on 2. Are you ready for the event?
Houston Station, on Space to Ground 2, we are ready.
JSC PAO, this is Houston. Please call station for a voice check.
Station, this is JSC PAO. How do you hear me?
We've got you loud and clear.
All right, sounds great. We'll start with some questions from reporters here at the Johnson Space Center.
Thank you. Good morning. This is Mark Carreau for Aviation Week and Space Technology. I have a question for Don Pettit. Right now, it looks like there'll be 3 of you on the space station for the track and capture of Dragon if the launch unfolds as planned. I wonder if you could sort of describe the preparations that you're making for that, and whether you were the lead for the track and capture as you launched.
For track and capture, we're just now starting to get up to speed on training for this event, and we have 2 primary means of training. We fly the actual arm, which is the world's best trainer for flying the arm, and then right here we've got two space station computers which double as a arm simulator, and we have a full set of actual arm hand controllers here, and with this setup we call it Robot, and it allows us to fly track and capture trajectories just like we would if we were in the simulators back in Houston. So it's a really neat capability, and I have it set up now all the time, and so I'll wake up in the morning and have a bag of coffee, and I'll be flying Dragon track and captures with a bag of coffee in my mouth and cinnamon scone in one hand and the hand controllers, and it's good to have this kind of capability.
For the actual event, will you be in the cupola or in the Destiny lab? I'm not quite sure. And could you sort of explain Andre's role as well?
Sure. Initially, it was going to be Dan Burbank is prime arm operator, and I would be what we call second arm operator, and Andre would be visiting vehicle officer, and we each have different roles, and the 3 of us were going to be doing the track and capture for Dragon. Now that the Dragon launch was delayed, Dan's going to be gone, and there'll only be 3 of us up here, and it will just be Andre and myself doing all the things that Dan, Andre, and me were originally trained to do. And we will be in the cupola, and I will be a prime arm operator, and Andre will be second arm operator. And we will have the robotics workstation in the lab set up and ready to go as what we refer to as a hot backup for contingencies that may lock up the controls for flying the arm right when you're in the middle of a Dragon capture. So we've got training and procedures for quickly flying to the lab and activating the robotics workstation and taking over the flying from the lab if we need.
Okay, well, next I believe we have some questions coming in from the phone bridge. First up, we'll have Jill Tolk. Jill?
Yes, this is Jill Tolk representing the Register newspaper in Yarmouthport, Massachusetts. So, Dan, you well know this question will be for you. In February, I got to visit some towns on the south shore of Boston, and I stayed only 15 miles from Plymouth, the Pilgrim's first stepping stone into the New World. On that note, during the past few months, what New Massachusetts anecdotes have you collected, and what thoughts or feelings would you like to share with the residents of your adopted hometown area on Cape Cod?
Jill, it's great to talk to you, and welcome aboard the International Space Station, or at least virtually. I think for us on board here, it's a kind of a very good metaphor, which you just mentioned, you know, in the way that Plymouth and Plymouth Rock represented the founding of the New World from the perspective of European settlers. In a very real way, I think the International Space Station, with the international partnership that makes all this possible, is in a sense the first major stepping stone that'll help us leave planet Earth and ultimately leave low Earth orbit and go to the Moon, asteroids, and Mars. And the kind of science we're doing up here, I think, is really important to that. Regarding Massachusetts and New England, my home, if you will, we feel very connected, I think, in a lot of ways to all the different places that all of us have touched or have touched us around the world. And you get to see it in a very personal way, looking out the windows in the cupola or the great windows in the service module or here in the laboratory. And it was a couple of weeks ago when Don had dusted off a lens that we have on board here that hasn't got a lot of use recently. It's a fisheye lens, and there was a really neat opportunity to basically set that up in the cupola and give essentially 180 degree or 360 degree views of the entire Earth beneath us, horizon to horizon. And there was one really neat shot that actually was centered directly on Cape Cod, and you could see from Cape Cod all the way to Boston. You could see off to the western edge of that view, Connecticut, and kind of in one shot, in just one 50th of a second, it sort of captured all the places that, at least when I was growing up, were near and dear to me.
Great. Thanks for the good words. Don, you know that I also represent the Appeal Tribune in Silverton, Oregon. I'm actually in Los Angeles, California right now. Flew into the Burbank airport yesterday, so I'm next door to Oregon. So what new Oregon anecdotes have you collected, and what thoughts or feelings would you like to share with all the folks back in Silverton?
Well, Oregon is currently being very Oregon, and the passes that we've had with Space Station, you look down at Oregon and you see clouds, and that's just the way it's supposed to be, and that's what makes it near and dear to my heart, because that's also the key to making everything green, which of course does not apply as soon as you get to eastern Oregon with rain shadow from the Cascade Mountains, and then you have a pretty dry highland desert.
Great, thanks so much.
Okay, next up we have Marcia Dunn.
Yes, good morning, gentlemen from the Kennedy Space Center. First, for you, Dr. Pettit, you'll be the one reeling in the Dragon capsule. Talk about the importance of this inaugural commercial cargo run, perhaps compare it to something in history that the rest of us Earthlings can relate to.
Well, I think you folks on the ground probably are more in touch with any historical perspective and what the meaning of all of this is. From a crew perspective, we have a very operational oriented task that we are doing intensive training now so that we can get this task done expertly. And Andre and I will be doing this task, and we'll be sharing the robotics duties for flying the arm from capture to ultimately berthing it onto the node nadir port.
For either you, Dr. Pettit, or you, Commander Burbank, or both of you perhaps, Discovery is about to ship out to Washington in another few weeks. Your thoughts on the shuttle's departure from its home base for more than 30 years, and how strange or odd is it for you both to have flown on something that's now being relegated as a museum relic?
Most of the airplanes that I've flown are also in museums, Marcia, but I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. Now, the shuttle did what the shuttle was best designed for, and it brought up some spectacular observatories into space and some satellites, and it helped build this nearly 1 million pound world-class laboratory that we have the great privilege of working and living aboard for 6 months. And I think having the shuttles, the space shuttles, in museums where people can come and see them and learn about them and learn about the wonderful technology, I think will be a good thing. And I think that from a budgetary standpoint is going to help give NASA the wherewithal to build and design the next vehicles. And I think for us, I think a big key part of that is getting heavy lift capability that can get us into low Earth orbit with vehicles that we could take beyond low Earth orbit.
Thank you both very much.
Okay, and next we have Suzanne Presto.
Hello, and thanks for having me. Good morning. My question is about the upcoming International Space Apps Challenge. I was wondering what your plans are up there and what you hope to accomplish from it.
And I tell you, I have to admit I don't know much about it, and frankly, from my perspective, my near-term focus has been, as Don has mentioned, kind of all the operational things we do on a day-to-day basis up here, and now in just a little bit over 2 weeks, getting prepared for my return to planet Earth. It'll be a bit of a bittersweet moment, though, leaving this wonderful place.
Okay, next up we have Olga Dobrodova.
Yes, hello. This is thanks for doing this. This is Olga Dobrovidova with the Russian news agency RIA Novosti. Tomorrow is a big day, obviously, for Russia and the world, commemorating the first human spaceflight. Do you have anything planned? Perhaps some surprises for your Russian crewmates, something like that? Thanks.
Olga, welcome aboard. The thing, all of us, I think that was a momentous day for all humankind, and the day that Yuri launched April 12, 51 years ago was really, really important. It basically set the foundation for a very wonderful and robust space program that now we enjoy cooperatively internationally. And for us, for our part here on board Space Station, we are going to have a little bit of a reduced schedule, and we're going to enjoy a couple of meals together, something that often with the busy tempo and the busy operations pace up here, we don't often get a chance to do. In fact, a lot of us end up eating individually on the fly as we go, and so this will be a good opportunity for us to take a few minutes and think about the history of our space program up till this point, and kind of talk a little bit about where we think we'll be going in the future.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And next up we have Denise Chow.
Hi, thanks for taking my question. We've been receiving reports of a strong earthquake off the coast of Indonesia, and I was just wondering if you've flown over that region and seen anything, or if you plan to photograph it later on in the day.
Denise, actually, we had not heard about that, and hopefully it's limited in its impact to folks in that area. I know there's been a lot of history. From our perspective here on board Space Station, there are certain times when we have the opportunity to see at least the results of tsunamis, the results of natural disasters, and there are some rare occasions that if the sun angle is just right, we can actually see some of those internal waves, some of those waves as they propagate across the ocean surface. And now that you've mentioned it, I think, I'm sure that our Earth observations teams on the ground are probably already looking at those kind of opportunities for us. And for our part, I think we'll do our best to take whatever imagery we can for that.
Thank you. And also, I was wondering if either of you have been following the situation in North Korea with their upcoming launch, and if you had any thoughts on that.
And I think in general, we haven't had a lot of opportunity to follow the news. I'm aware that a launch is being prepared, and beyond that, the specifics of the launch, at least I, for one, am not aware of a lot of the details.
Thank you.
Thank you, Denise. And next up, we have Robert Perlman.
Hi, Robert Perlman with CollectSpace.com. I'm currently standing on the shuttle landing facility, standing next to the shuttle carrier aircraft. And to work off Marcia's question from earlier, for Dan and Don, as shuttle veterans, is this an event, the delivery of Discovery and Discovery and then Enterprise, something that you'll be able to follow along, or you've requested to follow along on board station? Will you be able to watch the delivery? And what does this transition in general mean to you personally?
And Robert, welcome. As far as actually following the flight, from our perspective up here at 400 kilometers, there's actually relatively little opportunity to see anything even as large as the SCA, the shuttle carrier aircraft with Discovery, made it to it. We're able to see the evidence of ships and of planes in the form of wakes and contrails if the lighting is just right. But it's really difficult to get the kind of resolution to see much beyond that. As far as from a personal standpoint, following along, I think we're all very, and on one hand, sad to see the shuttles retire, but on another, also happy to have the opportunity to move on to new and hopefully better vehicles in the future.
And for Don, I wonder if you could give us an update on your trustee, the Zucchini, and in a general sense, how important is it to you and to the crew to have touches of Earth like green plants on board the station?
Space Zucchini's doing fine. And I probably get the most benefit out of him or her or it just because I'm the gardener, and so gardener has its privileges. I am a little surprised. I fire off these little blogs and I don't get much feedback. So I am surprised that other people seem to be following what's going on to my Space Zucchini, and I understand that my Space Zucchini even has a Twitter account. So anyway, it brings a smile to my face to see that people are interested in such trimmings associated with the serious business of flying into space.
Station, this is JSCPAO. We now will take a few questions from Twitter followers on our phone bridge. Shannon Moore is first. Shannon, with your question.
Hi, this is Shannon Moore, Geek Mom from Twitter. A lot of astronauts' time on station is spent performing experiments and maintaining critical systems. How do you find time to relax, keep in touch with your family back on Earth, and create the incredible photographs and educational videos like Dawn's Science Off the Sphere series?
We can't work 24 hours a day, even though we'd get a lot done if we could. And we get an 8-hour block of time allocated for sleep, and we typically work from around 7 in the morning to about 7 in the evening, and then maybe another hour or so after that to catch up on loose ends. And outside of that time, outside of about a 13 or 14-hour period, it's our off-duty time, and we could do whatever off-duty activities are available on space station. And so that's when we could take the moments to set up cameras, or you can read books. You can do whatever you want to do in that block of time, and it's an individual thing, things that are required for you to maintain yourself. You can contact your family, whatever hobby interests tickle your imagination while you are up here and are commensurate with the environment.
Thank you.
And next we have John Knight on the phone. John?
Hi, good morning. This is John Knight, a.k.a. John M. Knight on Twitter. My question for the crew this morning is, of all the experiments you performed up on station, which one had results that surprised or delighted you? And please feel free to include any of your recent experiments involving Lego bricks.
I'll talk about two experiments. One is a serious programmatic experiment. It has to do with combustion. And when scientists talk about the physics and chemistry of flames, they call it combustion. Everybody else just says that we've got fire. And we have a couple of different pieces of equipment here on station that we can investigate combustion processes, and we do that because of gravitational driven convection. Fires make heat, and the heat makes gas that are different densities in the air around them, and under gravity that makes convection, and it has a huge impact in the dynamics of how flames behave. And you do combustion experiments in a weightless environment, and you no longer have that artifact, and you can actually look at fundamental behavior of what the process is going on in the flame without the gravitational artifact. And one of these I saw last week with an experiment that we call BASS, and it's an acronym for which I no longer know what it stands for anymore. It just becomes its own noun. And it's basically burning plastic objects, solid plastic objects in air, and looking at the conditions under which the burning object will continue to burn, and under the conditions in which the object will flame out. And I was amazed that these burning hunks of plastic will continue to burn even if they're purged with nitrogen, which should have put the flame out. But the nitrogen purge would entrail enough air to keep the combustion process going. And what actually put the flame out was turning all the convection off around the flame, and then it burned out in about a second. And so this reestablishes what we teach our kids. If you ever catch on fire, you stop, drop, and roll. Well, in space, you stop and float, and that'll basically do the same thing.
Thank you.
And station, this is JSEPA. We'll now take a few questions that are on Twitter. This first one comes from Rena W. on Twitter. What experiments are you running now?
Okay, and we've got a lot of experiments that we're running on board Space Station. During our entire time here, there's something on the order of 200. Now, with that said, a lot of those are run remotely, are run by scientists all over the world on the ground. The ones that we interact with on a daily basis up here, for example, the combustion experiments that Don's been working on, both BASS and SPLICE. There's an experiment that all of us right now are currently involved in called integrated cardiovascular, and that one is one that's got many, many different aspects. It involves exercise, it involves ultrasonic investigations of changes in the heart muscle, changes in the vascular system, and those are pretty much designed, like a lot of the human research that we do on Space Station, to figure out how to keep humans healthy and safe in space long enough to go far from planet Earth, long enough to go, for example, to Mars.
This next question comes from Tavi Greener. It says, from Livia, age 9. Does your appetite and or your sense of taste change on board ISS?
Well, I think at least for the three of us, and probably actually for the 6 of us in this crew, our appetites are pretty strong even on planet Earth, and I guess they're at least as strong while you're up here. That's kind of a strange thing, because you would think that floating around like we do in space that you wouldn't necessarily need to burn as many calories, but for whatever reason you do. And I think on average probably all of us up here need something in excess of 3,000 calories a day. You almost can't get enough to eat. When you finally get tired enough at the end of the day, that may be the time that you're not as hungry and you're ready to go to sleep. I think for all of us in general, our activity levels tend to be pretty high, which probably accounts for some of that. We do exercise a lot, about 2.5 hours a day total. As far as the taste changes, this might have to do with some of the fluid shift, but for me, I like really spicy things, almost spicy to the point where I couldn't necessarily eat them on planet Earth. So hot sauces, hot as you can imagine, are great up here.
This next question comes from Eva Isa 75. Are you trying any technological device that will be used later in ordinary tasks?
One piece of engineering research. We do scientific research up here, which most people are familiar with. We also do engineering research, which is a second facet of space station that we work on. And these are using pieces of engineering equipment and using them, one of a kind, serial number 01 kind of piece of equipment, working the bugs out so that we can make spacecraft in the future and use the technology that we develop. So in this engineering research, one piece of equipment we're working on is regenerative life support equipment. And so the keystone in this regenerative life support is three pieces of equipment that are all hooked together: our toilet, distillation outfit, and then our galley. And it allows us to recycle the water from our urine, process it, purify it, and put it back in the galley. And I like to call it the coffee machine because it takes yesterday's coffee and makes it into today's coffee. And this is technology that I feel is going to be useful for places on Earth that are under significant water shortages, where we can have equipment that can recycle the water in a small, self-contained apparatus.
Okay, this next question comes from DataCheck. You are both researcher and researchee. What is the most difficult part of each role? What is the most fun?
To me, the most difficult part of the researchee is getting stuck by needles and having all this equipment stuck all over you. We wear this thing called a cardio press, which is this great big thing that you put on your hand that basically immobilizes your hand from doing anything useful. And fortunately, we only have to wear that for 24 hours. But it's the equipment and the needles and the sticking that I probably shudder the most at. However, the end result of all this equipment, it's pride from our souls, but the end result from the data is certainly worth the inconvenience of having been on the receiving end of the research.
Okay, this next one is probably likely for Don. Go ahead, Andre.
Well, I'd like to address the other side of doing the research. For me, it's one of the nicest things is to stick needles into Don and Dan to get blood samples. It's nice to do all this kind of research because it also involves a lot of equipment that you normally don't work with on the ground. And for example, we have for this experiment integrated cardiovascular, we use also the echo machine, and it's very nice to get good images of the heart, and with great help of the ground. So that makes it very rewarding to do this research on board of the space station.
And station, this is JSC PAO. We have one more follow-up question, and that'll about do it for today.
Hello, this is Jill Tolk again. Well, a question for Dawn and Dan. Since I'm writing for your hometown newspapers, I just wanted to know if there's anything you would like to say personally to the residents in your hometown areas in Oregon and Massachusetts, and perhaps even Connecticut for Dawn or for Dan.
Well, I guess I would just say that Cape Cod, Connecticut, New England are beautiful when you see them from the ground. They're even more so when you see them from space, and I'll be home soon.
And for all the folks around Silverton, Oregon, when I was growing up there, it's a community effort to educate kids growing up, and you pay that through your local taxes, and it supports your schools. And there's probably no way I'd be where I am right now if it wasn't for people willing to support the schools and give their kids the best education they possibly can.
As station, this is Houston ACR. That concludes the event. Thank you.
And to all, thanks very much for your participation for a great event. And station, we are now resuming operational audio communications.